Good evening, everyone. It's a beautiful night out tonight. Just got home from swimming and taking my son swimming, and I'm excited. Welcome to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversation. And one of the people I love to get into real conversation with is Kevin Howard, author of Onward at Last, the 2024 presidential edition, election edition. It's a great book, but he's also got a great podcast now, and I think I was influential in that decision, and I'm excited about that to
Absolutely.
be a part of greatness. So Kevin, I was listening to episode 4, and I've been listening to all your episodes. Episode 4 was extremely intriguing to me. One of the things you had talked about is, and you didn't beat the point up, but it was something you had mentioned, and it's something I want you to jump right in. You said, "I'm not just a black man, but there is a designation there. There is a distinction there, and there is this concern that not necessarily concern. There's a lot of concerns, a lot of things. I think we talk about a lot about people, young people. I think it's just in general, when I talk to young people today, they have the belief they will never own a home. And that's disturbing to me that young people have given up all hope on ever owning a home. And I seem to feel like that is a part of the conversation that comes up a lot. There is no young people enthusiastic about their future like they used to be. So that I know in your book you talk about the median rent to a model household income, the highest number of Americans. Median rent to median household income, where an equal number of American households earn more or less. Median mortgage to model. There's a big section in here that talks about that, how we're losing that advantage of actually someday owning a home, where we're losing that, where we are significantly closing ranks on that opportunity, where it's going away. So Kevin, jump right in and talk about the podcast. Let's talk about home ownership. I had invited a young guest, Quez, who is a good friend of mine now. I met him. He's I believe he's living in sort of a hotel, and it's not unusual here in Orlando. So go ahead, jump right in, Kevin.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for being here. It's always great to be on the Political No-Brainer podcast with you. And so you mentioned a couple of things there. So yes, I do. I am also a podcast host, and I absolutely was inspired by my participation on your podcast here, amongst other inspirations, but certainly you were a key one, there's no doubt. And so I launched on October 1st a podcast called Breadcrumbs. And it's a podcast for people who know it's not working. And and I think that's a broad sentiment across our country, that so many things that used to work are just not working. Like, we call into question whether our democracy is working. We call into question whether our ability to have a national conversation is working. We call into question whether our economics is working, right? I mean, so many things don't seem to be working the way we thought they used to work. We perceived that they could work, right? And the question is, how did everything get sideways? And so my podcast is a weekly show, and it's long form, just like the Political No Brainer podcast. So it could last. I've had episodes that lasted 2 hours. I've had episodes that lasted 40 minutes. The episode 4 that you're referring to, was a 40-minute podcast, and here it was a follow up on episode 2. So episode 2, I addressed the question of, who am I? As an individual within the context of the swirl of regional, national, and global problems that are pressing on our lives. It's easy to lose yourself in that. And so episode number 2 was on who am I, and me taking a sober look at who Kevin Howard is, in in the effort to have the listeners do the same thing. So it was a completely vulnerable, open, sober look, starting with the most pragmatic consideration, which is, how do I exist every day? How do I survive every day? And what can I learn about who I am based on that alone? and compare and contrast that between my perception of who I am, which was given to me by the cultural belief system growing up here in the United States. My perception growing up as an American was that I was an individual, independent of everyone else, right? Who who is free to pursue my happiness and pursue the resources I need to live the life I want to live by competing against everyone else. This is who I was. This is who I perceived myself to be. And yet in episode two, when I examined who I am and I did that through the lens of, but how do I exist? Let's start with the things that are undeniable, right? Things that all of us can perceive no matter what education you have. How do you exist every day, right? We need air to breathe. We need food to eat. We need water to drink. We need clothes to wear. We need so many things. And most of those things none of us produce. Most of those things none of us can produce. And yet we live every day getting these things. Now, the role that we play in getting these things is we hone our skills, we offer them to the public. They pay us money for these skills. We take that money and we buy all the things that we need to live every day. Okay, that's what we do. All right, but okay, but the fact is that by by us surviving in that way, it obscures the fact that we cannot live independently. We do not live independently. We cannot function independently. We don't exist independently. And yet, independence is a core American virtue, something that we aspire for, to be independent of each other. Yet even Elon Musk is just as dependent on everyone else as we are. Why? Because when he takes his money and buys all the things he wants and needs, it's us who produce it, right? I mean, it takes humans engaged in producing the things that support him in the same way that those same humans support us. And it also takes the earth, right? And the air that we breathe and the atmospheric pressure and the water that none of us produce for us to exist. So this blew a hole into this virtue that I used to define myself by, this notion that I am independent or I want to be independent or independence is a good thing, right? Independence is death. If this body was moved into a context where I did not need, where I could not receive all the things I needed, air, atmospheric pressure, food, nutrients, water, all, I would die immediately, right? So we can't live independently. And so that was episode two, trying to show that these cultural beliefs that we were given as we grew up in this country that we have lived by, right, actually hide the actual people we are. We do not function independently. We function in a symbiotic exchange. We are in relationship with each other. We're in relationship with the earth and the natural environment that sustains us. And there is no way for us to exist. There's no way for us to exercise discretion unless we receive all those things, most of which we can't produce, most of which we don't control. So that was episode two. And episode four, titled I Am Not Just a Black Man,
And
I
I
was,
mentioned that. I
yes,
found that interesting.
I was focused on, okay, so how do those virtues frame how I see Coach Trippy? How do those virtues frame how I see everyone else? If those virtues framed how I see myself as something that I'm not, more than likely, it makes me look at you in ways that you're not. And guess what? That's exactly what we determined in episode four. And so the hook say, looking into the camera and saying, I am not just a black man, right? The point of that statement is that I am not only a black man. Just is, yes, I'm a black man, but that's not all I am. And the problem is the way our culture encourages us to see each other is we focus in on a couple of characteristics. We focus in on, okay, so much of the cultural expression and the cultural relationship in America is filtered through the fact that I'm a black man, as if that's all I am. And it's not true, right? In the same way that if you're a Hispanic woman, right? We all see you as a Hispanic woman and think because you're a Hispanic woman, we might know something about you. But actually, we don't, because even a Hispanic woman, just like even a black man, it's far more complex than that, right? The fact is that, and so episode 4 was really just focusing in on the idea that we're not these labels we wear. We're not the companies that we work for. We're not the car that we drive. I'm a Ford man. I'm a GM man. I'm Harley, people who ride a Harley. I'm a Harley man. I'm a marble man, right? No, none of those things are what we are. What we actually are human beings. And the problem with reducing everyone down to these few characteristics is that it allowed those things to be weaponized in order for us to fight. So why is the society so vitriolic? Why is America so divided? Because everyone is on teams, little sub teams. Whether you're a MAGA voter, whether you're a progressive, whether you from East Coast, West Coast, you're a Floridian, whatever it is, we got a billion labels and we reduce everyone down to those labels. And if you're not on my team, you're a them. And if you're on my team, you're an us. And I can tell you, them never gets the same rights, never gets the same treatment as us, right? And so why are we at each other's throats? Why do Americans kill themselves more than any country by far in the world? Even though we're the wealthiest country in the world, because we don't treat each other like humans. We treat each other like opponents, like people that stand in the way of everything we want, and therefore we can't have any consideration for them, right? And so episode 4 was about looking at that. This is what our virtues have encouraged us to do. If the way I take care of my family is I have to compete against you, Coach Tribby, right? I can't, how much consideration can I give you if the difference between whether I feed my family or you feed your family is who wins between us? This is what we do to each other. This
So
is
let's
what we
dive
have
right into that.
normalized.
So I love that, right? Let's dive into that for a second. When you think of the competitive side of the human nature, and you feel like it's more competitive here in the U.S. than it may be in some other countries, right? So let me put it this way: when I was a kid, I worked for a chain of restaurants. It was Gators Dockside. It was another similar chain, the Ale House, right? And so I had friends that worked at the ale house. That was a pedigree. However you want to look at it, we were in competition with who made more money, who had better selection of draft beers. It was a part of our. So when you think of that, and I'm just using that as sort of a metaphor, those two restaurants, which is all sorts of things. America is a very vibrant economy. Chains are booming. Independent both these restaurant chains started from independent owners. Now they both had 20 some locations. One was growing faster than the other, but still in all, you may not see that in another economy, in another part of the world's economy. You may see that one independent owner hone in on his one restaurant versus these chains and like you said, this competition that's constant. It's not just a restaurant you work at, it's the car you drive, it's the home you own. But you may not
It's
see
the
it,
girl you date.
right. But
It's
in
the
other
friends
part
you have.
right, but in other parts of the world you may not see a community with this amazing wall around it versus another community right next door to it with this amazing what a name and a neat name and a landscaping and the entryway. A lot of times in smaller economies, people are glad to just have a home and a small plot of land. And there is no community with a name and a pedigree so it is a defining thing in America that our economy has become such a big GDP that there is going to be that kind of competition. So now my question always remains, because I am a capitalist, but the funny thing about being a capitalist, it no longer has to do with what I want to buy next. I'm older. I've always been fine with my share of the bounty, but it's just like, what can I accomplish next? I probably will, I will probably stand in line for a burger just as fast as I will walk into a fine restaurant and somebody says, some maitre d' says, Mr. Trippy, glad to see you. I mean, it's not a big deal to me, but when you're younger, it may very well be a big deal to you. Um, but how do we turn America into this giant kibbutz, if you will? How do we create this feeling of where there's no longer everybody's okay with? I mean, I don't, and there's good, and even the political part of America has gotten to that point where you're almost like you're either a progressive and you're going to take an oath of poverty, or it seems like the people who are Trumpsters are thinking he's the guy that's going to help us level up, and that may be where the contention comes.
So I hear you, Coach. Let's, if we can, so we can keep the conversation as simple as possible. I'm going to ask that we peel back the labels for a second, right? So we're talking about competition, and I know it's a virtue. We learn competition from pee wee football, from little league baseball, from t-ball, right? Okay, and so, oh my God, I must be a communist if I'm calling into question competition. But here's the
Not
thing:
at all. But also keep in
competition
mind,
is competition. But I just want
let me just
to
point out
run
one
with it.
thing.
Yes,
Go run with it, and then I'm going to stop. I know I interrupt a lot, but remember Pee Wee football or
yes,
it's a franchise almost. It's something we created in America, which you may not see in smaller economies. You may just see kids playing football, and I mean, when I go to Argentina, I saw kids just playing soccer in a field. It was not a soccer field. It was a barren field with basically weeds and dust and dirt. They were just
yeah,
happy to be playing soccer with a ball that I don't know that I would have continue to keep. I think I would have replaced it already.
yeah. Well, okay. There is a okay. So first and foremost, competition is a survival technique. Okay. Now, we don't see competition as a survival technique when we're talking about sports because you're playing a game. In the context of a game where the only thing at stake is whether you win or lose, right? Then it's just fun. It's so that's a certain kind of competition. I want to differentiate that competition. Like when we watch the NBA or the National Football League or Major League Baseball, whatever, I mean, you got millionaires playing against millionaires, and even they're sitting on the sideline in the dugout crying because they just lost the game, they're going to the big house to do some big things that all of us wish we were going to do, right? So, in other words, nothing really is at stake other than the desire to be successful. Okay, that's one level of competition. But when you use competition as the means by which we take care of ourselves and our family, okay, then competition becomes a blood sport. Now, and so we have a history of economics, of social order, in which we can which how do you access resource? And in medievalism, whoever had the strength, whoever had the gun, whoever was stronger, they would just take what was theirs. They had the hunter, whatever. Okay, competition was a much fairer way to distribute scarce goods and services, right? Because basically everyone got to compete. And if you were better, smarter, faster, or whatever, and everyone had a fair shot at it, that would be that was an opportunity. Everyone had an opportunity to get theirs, right? It wasn't simply the person who was, the strongest and was just killing people and taking their, that type of thing. Or there was an order to it. But here's the thing. So competition is a great way to distribute essential goods and services when there's not enough for everyone. When there's not enough for everyone. The innovation that we've done over the last 50 years has obscured the fact that we have made scarcity obsolete. There is no scarcity of the essential goods and services that people need to live a very comfortable life. We don't have scarcity of cars in America. We do not have scarcity of food in America. We do not have scarcity of housing in America. We're amidst a housing affordability crisis, but it's not because we don't have enough houses to house or housing to house the homeless. Is that some people own so much housing that there's not enough for other people. I mean, that's I'm saying. It's literally a distribution problem because when you have a competition where everyone is encouraged to take as much as they possibly can, we glorify the billionaires, right? If everyone is trying to take as much as they can, you are necessarily not going to have enough for everybody. And so when you look at poverty in America, the working class, the working poor, increasingly the middle class, what they're going through is not because they don't work hard every day. It's not because they don't play by the rules. It's not because they're not productive. It is because in the competition for goods and services, they are losing to wealthier people who are altering the rules that tip it further and further and further in their favor. And so now we have a situation in the United States where the average middle class family cannot afford to buy a house. If they don't own one already, if they don't inherit one, they cannot afford to buy a house in the average American city. Okay. This this is what we're engaged in. And so competition, when there's enough for everyone, that encourages gluttony like ours does, right? Ours encourages us to gather to ourselves more resources than we need just in case we can't produce more resources in the future. And so we have it sitting there. So we're all doing it. But what I'm saying to you here is there is a finite amount of resource on the planet. So if everyone is trying to get as much as they can, it's no different than dinner with your family at night. If everyone around the table tries to take as much as they can, it doesn't matter how much food you prepare, you will not have enough to feed everyone. And this is where we are today. So this is why I'm challenging the question of whether or not we use competition so severely that it no longer serves most Americans. This is where we are. What's happening to the middle class is where they're losing to the one percenters. What's happening to the working class is they're losing to the billionaires. And we are celebrating the billionaires. Right. That's what's happening. And so how far do we want to go with this competition?
Now, I very much agree with you. We are losing out to the billionaires. There's a closing that the wealth is consolidating more and more and more and more. You've actually got figures on it. 1%, 99% of the wealth may be in the control of 1% of the population. There's figures out there. 99% of the wealth is in control of 1% of the population. I
Well,
agree. I don't know that that was the right figure. I'm saying I think you actually know the correct figures. I'm gonna
yeah,
let you
yeah.
chime in. Yeah.
The Federal Reserve, according to Federal Reserve data in 2021, for the first time in U.S. history, the top 1% of wealth and income earners in the United States had more wealth and income than the American middle class. Consider that, than the American middle class.
No, right.
That
And
that is never, and that's just 1%, the top 1%. And so, I mean, there are other data points. If you look at the distribution, if you look at all the distribution of income from the GDP from 1980 to 2020, those 40 years, right? The Department of Labor statistics show that based on the productivity of America for that 40-year period, right? Only the top 2% of wage earners are better off. Everyone else is either flat where they were in 1980 or doing worse off. And most everyone is doing worse off because everything has gone to the top 2%. So I'm just saying, this is competition. It's competition that is squeezing out most Americans from the benefit of their own labor. Right. And so this is reason why we need to call into question whether this is effective, whether, because I don't understand how we Your question really was, how do we unwind this? How do we get America to a different place? Well, we're talking about a level of wealth that has never been seen in American history. This billionaire class.
So
I don't know how we unwind it.
I'm going to try to answer a question of how I think, and unwinding it is a big task. How I think we can mitigate it to an extent, unwinding it, reversing it. So I'm going to talk quickly about. I love to say that in Hollywood, there's a 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon. In economics, I believe there's a 6 degrees to Warren Buffett. So
Warren
for a
Buffett.
moment, for a moment, I'm going to talk about Warren Buffett, one of his top stock pickers, top stock buyers, Ted Weschler. Ted Weschler worked like me and you. I mean, this is a true story. This isn't a created story. He worked like me and you. He had a job. Ultimately, he accrued about $70,000 in, I believe, an IRA. He had a
Okay.
lot of knowledge in investing. And I don't say everyone can do this, but let's just put it in perspective without beating up the point of Ted. He took that $70,000 and he turned it into a $260 million fortune. That is his net worth at one point in time. It's probably higher now. And he says, in a perfect world, nobody would know about this account, he said, but now that the number is out there, I'm hopeful that some good can come of it by serving as a motivation for new workforce entrants to start saving and investing early. That's his words. That's his quote. That's verbatim. I'm reading it.
Yes.
Um, so, um, Normally you never see investors' private numbers, such as the size of Weschler's account, when he converted his regular IRA to a Roth IRA in 2012, or the size of his Roth at its year in 2018, the last due for which ProPublica had data. Weschler declined to update his IRA numbers to discuss how the money he managed for Berkshire has performed. But here's my point. He took his IRA, he converted it to a Roth IRA. He had that knowledge. Then there was
Mhm.
other maneuvers he did. He had that knowledge. But let's be clear, he did start with $70,000 and ultimately turned it into $260 million. So what I'm saying is even though you have this condensed wealth, you have Jeff Bezos worth $140 billion. He's the one guy that owns Amazon. Is it possible that the way we mitigate this condensed wealth, that people learn how to invest in these guys that know how to do what they're doing, then you would kind of create a sense of equal wealth or not? Because I know you were also a venture capitalist in your career, so I have to ask that.
Yeah. Look, the again, the earth can only produce so much resource. What Wall Street has done in the last 50 years has produced enough dollars, US dollars. The wealth has more US dollars in circulation. Well, they are holding it than 20 times the global GDP. That's an estimate. 20 times the global GDP, which means that they have more money than there are stuff to buy out there. Okay. And the only reason our value has not collapsed, right, is because so far the US dollar is still the required currency for most international trades. What I am saying to you here is they did that in order to control everything. And now they do control everything. Okay. Right. Um, we're not going to solve the problems that we face by emulating what they did. Why? Because how many times more than global GDP do we want to print money for? In other words, the investor that you are speaking about, I have no doubt was not just a stock picker. I have no doubt that there were, as Berkshire is engaged in, derivative activities, right? There is financial, I call it shenanigans. Anyone who, and you would, I believe, would call it shenanigans, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about that is a fundamental thing in the derivatives market, right? Okay. The people who hold our stock, the stock we buy, okay, the people who hold it, the brokerage firms, the holding companies, the there is a series of organizations in the pipeline that consolidate various types of securities and hold them and track how they're traded. Okay. Well, those entities have the right to take out debt secured by our asset, by our stock, without our permission, which means that under law, under the UCC code that's legal in all 50 states, right? Right. The brokerage firm or the whoever is holding your shares, right? The custodian can take out debt against your assets, and so can you. So and here is a basic use of the derivatives market where it's okay to double leverage the same collateral. Well, consider this. I think Coach Trippy, you would be able to get rich pretty easy if you were able to get financing using someone else's collateral. We can't do that.
No, we don't
But
have that
they can't.
option.
Okay, no, we don't have that option. And the thing about it is, every time you take out a loan, the bank is simply printing new money. So the derivatives market is the primary reason why there is more American dollars out there than 20 times GDP, is because they are able to use collateral without anyone's permission to secure financing to speculate about a lot of things. And the thing about it is this stuff can come back to bite us, right? And that's what we learned in the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy in 2008, right? Was that when Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, the people who had their money invested by Lehman Brothers called Lehman Brothers to have their assets moved to another investment bank that wasn't bankrupt. And what they were told is that their assets had been seized by JP Morgan Chase because Chase had lent Lehman billions of dollars secured by their clients' assets, right, without the permission of their clients, right? And that because Lehman filed bankruptcy, JP Morgan Chase had a right to take the collateral. And guess what? Under the 2005 bankruptcy law, a special class of creditor that's not you and I, that so far has only been legally determined to be the top four banks in the country. Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Okay, they have any collateral that secures their financing. They have an unimpeachable claim on those assets that even fraud does not stop them from taking the assets. And so when Lehman went bankrupt and their customers wanted their assets, and they were told that Chase had the assets, and the customers start suing Chase because they didn't give permission for Chase to use their assets as collateral, the bankruptcy judge wrote in the decision for Lehman that yes, this is what the 2005 bankruptcy law says. Chase's claim on these assets is unimpeachable, absolute, right? And as a result, the client's money went to JP Morgan Chase. And what that did was seriously wealthy people who had their money in Goldman Sachs and the rest of the investment banks started pulling their money. This is why we had to bail them out. They would have failed by the end of October because people were pulling their money because this is how they found out what happened
Through
at
the
Lehman.
what
Yeah,
happened at
through the
Lehman.
Lehman bankruptcy. Okay, this is the shenanigans that wealth has been used. These are the kind of tricks that we can't do that allows them to be as wealthy as they are, right? They have broken the economics. They have broken capitalism. They have broken free markets, right? With the shenanigans that they are doing and have done. So replicating what they're doing, being a good stock picker, right, is not going to solve the problem. Right? So
Well,
that's
allegedly
where I'm
he
coming
wasn't a stock picker. He was an index fund picker for all I know. He was
Yeah,
an IRA picker. He wasn't buying individual
I
stock.
gotta, I bet my bottom dollar there is no way $70,000 got to be. What was the final figure you said?
Well, I don't know that it's a final figure. It
Oh
was
no,
at
what was
one
the
point
figure? Yeah,
$260 million. I'm sure it's
yeah,
more
yeah,
than
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you
significantly
don't
more
get
than
that
that
kind
now.
of growth. Right. You
I
don't get that kind of growth just from picking stocks and holding them. You get that kind of growth from playing the derivatives market. I'm telling you, there's so many
Well,
other
he
types
says
of
he didn't. He
shenanigans.
in his it is in here in my notes,
Yeah,
and but I
yeah.
agree with you that it doesn't sound right. I'm not going to disagree with him or make any bold accusations, but he did make it clear that he did not do anything out of the ordinary that no other individual investor could have not done. He's been
That's
clear on
right.
that.
This is normal for them. This is out of the ordinary for you and I. Let me give you another example. I'll just give you
Well, let me
another
tell you one
example.
thing. Let me tell you one thing about what the problem may be is when you think of J.P. Morgan, the CEO of J.P. Morgan is Jamie Dimon, who is the most revered banker in the history of ever. He is the most revered investment banker. So if he says kind of like they used to say about Bernie Madoff, when he suggested something be a rule, it became a rule. So there is a pedigree thing in banking, and they are the ones that make the rules. And just like you said, my question is if people were more informed through some way without me elaborating on what I think some of the ways should be, would we be able to control the rules? So here's another statement that I want to ask or make. Again, Warren Buffett made this claim. I think in the last years, he has what they call the Woodstock of investment. His
Yes,
it's in
it his
Omaha once a
annual
year.
review.
His
That's right.
annual
His annual.
review.
That's
And
right.
he had said, hey, he was proud to say this that Berkshire Hathaway, which is his hedge fund, which he says is clearly not a hedge fund, but it is a hedge fund, but it's not a hedge fund. It's an investment. It's a, it seems like it seems like it does a lot of
He actually has used the insurance model.
right, which is
He
actually
is
because he
so
owns
brilliant.
Geico, but he owns a
Yes,
lot of
he
other
used.
insurance companies, and he was actually able to open Berkshire underwriting with
Yes,
like he says, is Jeet Jane, who is his insurance guy, created this company for pennies, basically stationary, and it's creating billions of dollars in revenue
yes.
for Berkshire Hathaway. But I'm trying to remember my point. Okay, so he made this statement, not knocking him or accusing him of being a hedge fund. I don't he is not. But he made this statement that the company, his company, Berkshire Hathaway, paid $5 billion in taxes. And if just 800 other companies paid $5 billion in taxes, no one else would have to pay taxes. No income tax, no state tax. I mean, this is his figure, and he's pretty good at these things. He's really good at math, or he had somebody
Yes.
do the figure before. We don't have that rule in place. So what we have is again, like you said, people playing the system. We have the thing called the Unger House in the Cayman Islands, where
Yes.
I don't know,
Oh, yes.
fifty
How many
thousand
companies? How many
corporations.
companies are registered to the?
I think it's 50 or 60,000
Yes.
corporations. And where I'm getting at is Obama called it the biggest scam ever, and he appointed Timothy Geithner to be his Treasury Secretary. And then Timothy Geithner was going to fix it, but Timothy Geithner came under scrutiny for his salacious financial behavior, if you will. And then when Timothy Geithner had enough of the position, they said Jack Lew was even worse, who took over for Timothy Geithner. They said, "Hey, that's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house when it comes to the Unger house." And so we're at a disadvantage here, no matter which way we turn. The rules are skewed, and those who are benefiting from them are benefiting, like you said, just consuming every ounce of oxygen, every ounce of financial oxygen there is to consume. But all I'm saying is, I guess as the old adage goes, don't hate the player, love the game. How about we start teaching individuals either the rules or the creation of the rules or
No, because okay, I cannot express this enough. They have done very well. There's no question about it. At the expense of everyone else. I mean, okay, you personally are doing quite fine right there, Coach Trippy. You're living within your means. You got a nice house. You worked hard. It's old school at Coach
It's
Trippy's house.
old
I love
old
it.
school, and I'm
Old
fine with
school.
it.
Yeah, and that's right. That's right. But its quality is decent. Okay. Okay. I am telling you, that young gun that was going to be on the phone with us, Quinn or Quinn,
Quez, he's going to be on the phone
Quez.
with us on
Yeah,
the on
yeah, yeah. The
next.
reason why his generation knows that they're not going to own a house is because the entire economic landscape for them either to earn money in any consistency, for them to get the skills that they need without being bankrupt to start with, right? For and the pricing of everything has changed to where it doesn't make sense. They can see they're not going to be able to do it, right? Unlike our generation, who had a much different economics. Well, the difference between what we had coming up through the 70s and 80s and 90s, right? The difference between what we had and what is going on today in the 2020s, right, is that extreme wealth broke the system. They have taken so much money. They have bankrupt our federal government. Again, we in 1992 we only had $4 trillion in federal debt. Okay, it's in 2025 we have 37 trillion. So in 33 years we added $33 trillion, and most of the American people are worse off than they were in 1980. Where did that money go? It went to them.
So
It created the greatest billionaire class ever, right?
keep in mind,
$140 billion. What kind of what Amazon is not that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. I mean, all the great companies down through history. Remember when General Motors used to be what's good for business for General Motors is good for America? Yeah, there's been other dominant companies, none worth this kind of ridiculous, distorted, manipulated valuations of $1 trillion. This is what wealth has done. Because guess what? Who owns all those shares? 95% of the shares owned in the S&P 500 and the Dow Industrials in the NASDAQ composite is owned by BlackRock, right? State Street, Vanguard. And you got one more who escapes me, but I'm just saying, four entities own 95% of these stocks that have been run off the table for how long? Right? Look, it's they've all done this to gather as much money to themselves and squeeze the rest of us out. And so yes, I there's a lot of things we can do. We can go Coach Trippy. We can go back to the basics. We can stop trying to chase the latest bubble and go back to you know doing business in our local communities, buying from our neighbors, you know, do, unplugging from these global organizations who are completely extracting all the profits out of our community, you know, and go and doing what with it? Buying our politicians, buying our governments, buying our courts. I mean, right? That's what they're doing. Buying our media, I mean, so that they can tell us what to think and how and what to buy. I mean, so I know this conversation has kind of spun out a little bit, Coach
not at
Trippy,
all, because that's what
but
we do here. This is what we very much what we do here. And this, I'm gonna point out one thing. When you talked about the national debt being $4 trillion, keep in mind that when Ronald Reagan took office, the national debt hadn't even reached $1 trillion. No, no, it
that's right.
reached it under
Yeah,
his
under
watch.
under his watch. Yeah, it was
It
like 800 and
never the
something
trillion
billion
dollar
under
figure. It
Jimmy.
was no
Yeah.
initially it was in the three four. Initially,
No, no,
uh,
no.
it was in the
No,
six
for
hundred
Reagan,
billion.
for
When he
no,
was
if
sworn in, when Ronald Reagan was sworn in, the national debt was around $600 billion, I
yeah, but
think.
that was Jimmy Carter. Okay, so there's a lag. So Ronald Reagan's first budget was started in October 1st of 1980. Just like Donald Trump is just going into his first budget.
Right,
If well,
right.
right, okay. In other words, this was Joe Biden's budget ended in September 30th, 2025. And so what I'm trying to say is if you look at Reagan's 8 budgets, the budget that Jimmy Carter handed over to Ronald Reagan, federal debt was like $890 billion.
Right.
He absolutely
Yes.
dragged it over the $1 trillion Yes, he dragged it over, and in fact, by the time he left office, it was 3 trillion. So
Yes,
he
but
more than
now keep
triple.
it. This is such an important thing you just mentioned because when you think about the $890 billion that he handed off to Ronald Reagan, which is again a smoke and mirror, it was Jimmy Carter that started the buildup of our military, that started the reinvention of our military. It was Ronald
Yes,
Reagan that
yeah,
took all the credit for it.
yes,
But the
yes.
fact of the matter is, it was Jimmy Carter who really got the ball rolling. Our military was dilapidated and underfunded and under
Oh, it was it was
R&D,
it it
research
was
and
the over
development.
it yeah, it was Vietnam. I mean, when we pulled out of Vietnam, the military was broken. The perception of the military was broken.
And the
The
funding
trust
was
in
gone
and
too.
and,
And
and
the
oh yeah,
funding was gone. So and it
so
was
what?
Jimmy Carter that really,
Yeah.
I just love to give credit where credit is due, and especially when it's Jimmy Carter, because there are people that say, "Oh, he was a great Christian, but he was a terrible president." The fact of the matter is, he was a very good Christian, and he was actually a very good president. And if we followed his lead for another 4 years, I'm not so sure we would be in the scenarios we're in today, as much of where we are today. I don't think we would be as far along as we are today. So that's
Well,
just
I
me
mean, he
thinking out
was
loud,
as,
but
as the first president to put solar panels on the White House. I mean, the idea that he understood then, because he was an engineer, that we had a problem in climate and that we needed to move to renewable energy, and that he gave his I don't they call it the morose speech, where he was calling on Americans to tighten the belt and that we needed
yes.
to become more energy efficient. He was right. He was
As
absolutely
he was
right.
actually Ronald Reagan that took this solar panels off the White House,
Yeah,
actually.
Ronald Reagan took him off. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, and,
And
and
so,
you know, go get the doolies. Let's. No,
and
I hear you.
there's good reason for that because there's money in energy and there wasn't money in solar. There was no there's a lot of things we could do with energy that we're not doing and we could and then you've got a president who calls coal big beautiful coal and that's the popular mating call of often of
Yeah,
energy when in fact there's other options. And I'm
there's
not
other options
knocking.
and cleaner options. There's cleaner
Yes,
options. Yeah.
and there's I'm not knocking. It's just this is what we do on this podcast is we go deep, we go wide, we go too far, we sometimes argue, but the fact of the matter is this is all reality that we
Well,
have
well,
got.
let's expose the shenanigans then. How about this on the Political No Brainer podcast? Okay, so let me ask you. Let's put a question on the table, Coach Trippy, because you lived through the Great Recession. It drives where we are today. Based on everything we learned since 2008, okay, why do you think AIG went bankrupt and we had to bail them out to the tune of $180 billion? AIG, the world's largest insurance company.
So
Why
I'm
did
gonna
they
tell
go
you what I
bankrupt?
think. I'm gonna tell you what I think. I think it was all again building an building a narrative, like we talked about. So George Bush said, "Look, I'm the president. This is overseen." So this would be W, the younger Bush, right?
Yes, the
So
younger Bush.
I'm the president that's overseeing the greatest home ownership in America. And
Okay.
there it was, the greatest level of home ownership in America on his watch. But what
Yes.
there, so, and I remember the advertisements. There was this like beautiful home in a picture, because back then you used to actually read a magazine or something. And it said $600 a month, PI, principal and interest. It left out tax and insurance. It also left out the fact that if you're moving there, from a one bedroom apartment into a 2,300 square foot house, your electric bill is going to go up significantly. It
Yes.
also left out a lot of other details, which bring me back to my initial point that education and understanding what you're signing and what you're agreeing to and what responsibility you're taking on is a big deal. You should know that. So how we got to AIG being bailed out to the tune of $140 billion
I thought it was
is
180 billion
$180
dollars.
billion is the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is that Americans were duped into buying these beautiful homes. And then ultimately, the asset was retrieved by these very wealthy companies. There was a there was a privatizing of gains and a socializing of losses, and there was the whole scenario that goes on every time. But then these banks held these assets. They had these homes aren't worthless. They're in a lot. They're the people that own them are in underwater, but the bank that takes them over is going to do very well in time with them. So it was again just another setup, but the setup was due to a lack of understanding, which I have always believed could have been mitigated through through some sort of enormous educational change in either our K through 12 education system or a life skills education system.
And no, I'm an advocate of that system that you have spoken on a number of times. Well, I will say to you, Coach, that yes, I mean I think that people were built into buying houses. I think that's true.
Duped
That is a
into it.
part that is a part of the narrative, right? It doesn't feed to why the world's largest insurance company, when the market started to collapse, when Wall Street started to collapse, what made AIG collapse? And the thing is, this is knowable, this is verifiable. You can go into your chat bot and verify everything I'm about to say, with multiple sources. But basically, what had happened is, so what Wall Street had done, and you could thank Bill Clinton for this. When Bill Clinton deregulated on December 29th, 2000, Bill Clinton signed into law some federal legislation that deregulated complex financial instruments. Yeah, what does that mean? Well, what it did is take all the laws that restricted how Wall Street can speculate. They took most of those laws away, which meant that Wall Street was free to speculate in ways that they hadn't been free to do so since FDR. Okay. So one of the things they did is they said, okay, all right, we're going to bundle mortgages. So just a simple example, 100 mortgages put together. We're going to bundle 100 mortgages, and it's going to be 20 mortgages are 800 credit scores or above. 20 mortgages are 700, 20 mortgages are 600, 20 mortgages are 500, 20 mortgages are 400. Okay. Now they're going to take that bundle. The 800 credit scores have no default history. So they are rated AAA, just like the US government hasn't defaulted. Okay. So they're rated AAA. All the other mortgages would be rated some level AA down to B, down to non-investment grade. Okay. So instead of having the rating agencies just rate based on the actual underlying risk, now it was legal for let's for any massive investment bank to start a wholly owned subsidiary that would issue out credit default insurance. And so what the credit default insurance would do is take the default rate of the 700 credit scores, of the 800, of the 600 credit scores, of the 500 credit scores, and of the 400 credit scores. And if any of those loans defaulted, the insurance would make the payments. So by insuring all the higher risk tranches of the 100 loans, so that they all had no default risk, Moody's and S&P and Fitch gave the whole bundle a AAA rating. Okay. Now, but the problem is no one bothered to check whether the insurer, this unregulated insurer that's wholly owned by the investment bank, right, had properly secured the reserves to pay
To
the
back it up.
policies to back it up. That's exactly right. Okay. So, okay. But this is how Wall Street was able to take American housing finance and get it to be AAA rated for the first time in US history. Okay. All right. And what did that do? If there's a whole category of asset investment that is restricted by either law or by industry practice to only invest in the safest investments. And that would include life insurance companies, that would include pension funds, that would include municipal investors, and on and on. There's a whole category of these institutional investors who only invest in the safest investments. AAA, maybe AA. Right. Okay. Okay. Wall Street was targeting them to try to get them to buy American housing. They were the target. And so the way to access them was to create a financial instrument that had a triple A rating. And this is how they got it. Okay. So now you have these instruments that have 400 credit scores in there, 500 credit scores in there. Okay. And they're rated triple A. Then they turn around and they sell that triple A rated security to the California public employee pension. CalPERS is the biggest public pension in the world, right? Florida's public employees has a massive pension fund. Okay, these pension managers who could only invest in the safest investments now start buying these triple A rated securities
These
that
bundles.
gave these bundles that gave a higher return on investment than normal triple A rated securities. That's the lure. Why? Because the mortgages, the interest rates in there were paying a higher return than the 800 credit score interest rate. The 800 credit score is paying the lowest interest rate out there, but that 400 credit score is paying a much higher interest rate. So the blended interest rate of the bundle
Was
is
high.
higher than a triple A rated risk would normally get. So that attracted trillions of dollars from pension funds, from life insurance companies, okay, to buy this Wall Street instrument. So also Wall Street would bundle it, issue out the insurance on the higher risk, get the rating agencies to brand it AAA, turn around and sell it to the pension funds, right, as the end player. Okay, so that game was working, booming through 2006 until the underlying risk started playing out. And these pension funds start losing money because the 400 credit scores are defaulting like 400 credit scores.
Like they
Right.
do.
And,
Like they
and like they
do.
do. And the insurance, the unregulated insurer was undercapitalized, was never intended to be able to be able to provide default insurance for that level of risk, right? Never intended. Okay. So, all right. So now every bank did not know that game. Every bank did not. This is only a few. Okay, and the proof of this is this. Okay, so this is why these bundles start that were rated AAA became worthless as people started seeing that the rating was misrated, that the risk there was much higher than the AAA rating they were given, and there were hundreds of billions of dollars of these securities, right? That was still AAA rated in 2008 when Bear Stearns went bankrupt, when Washington Mutual went bankrupt, when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had to be taken over by the federal government because they bought this bullshit. They bought the AAA rated
But
securities. Okay, so I'm getting to the point. I'm getting to the point. Okay, so why AIG failed? Well, the investment banks who actually knew that the AAA rating was bullshit, it's worth the language. It's worth the language. The few banks that actually knew that the AAA rating was BS purchased an unregulated insurance policies from AIG to say, hey, if these AAA rated securities actually default, which no AAA rated security had ever defaulted in US history at that point. So when Goldman Sachs, and we know Goldman Sachs was one of them, went to AIG and said, hey, we would like to buy up to $20 billion worth of insurance to secure our AAA rated portfolio. From AIG's perspective, they're saying, okay, this is odd. You want to pay us millions of dollars in premiums from like 2006, 2005, before these, right? all the way up into 2008, you want to pay us this money on a security that has no historical default rate. None. Okay. Well, we will take your money. Thank you very kindly. Okay. So when they blew up in 2008 and all the banks, Bear Stearns, Washington Mutual, Fannie and Freddie, everyone starts failing, Lehman Brothers, okay, right? The few banks who knew it was BS, who knew they had defrauded everybody, start going over to AIG saying, "Hey, time to pay up on our pay up on our credit default swaps." This is what they did. Credit default swaps were made unregulated, i.e., legal, by Bill Clinton on December 29th, 2000. Okay. That is what caused AIG to go bankrupt. They could not pay the billions of dollars of face value insurance that Deutsche Bank, that Goldman Sachs, and a few others had purchased billions of dollars of credit default swaps to cover the AAA rated securities that they knew was bullshit, that had defrauded the pensioners and everyone else. And the American people actually figured it out, coach. Because
Well, let me tell you one
if
thing
you
though.
go, yes, go ahead.
When the smoke cleared and the American people figured it out, do you know who AIG paid $10 billion to take on $20 billion of that risk?
No, who? Tell me.
They paid Berkshire Hathaway $10
Yeah,
billion to take on $20 billion of that risk. And do you know that Warren Buffett praised Ajit Jain for his being able to figure out very closely what the return would be on that $10 billion? You know why? Because they had a heads up on what the return would be. Because all this bullshit that and I don't believe for a minute that even like you said, the benefit funds, like California Benefit Fund, didn't know what was going to happen.
no
I
one.
No
Lehman
one,
Brothers didn't know. If
Lehman
Lehman
Brothers couldn't
Brothers,
know, but it was a
if
sign
they
of
had if
risk,
they knew, they would have bought the insurance too. See,
right?
this. I mean,
Right,
they
but
didn't know.
when they
Washington Mutual didn't know.
in the end, those who benefited were the very well informed, is where I'm getting at, and those who lost, again, just like you said, were the
Yeah, but
very,
we're talking. But coach, we're talking fraud. We're
but it has
talking
never been
no,
identified as fraud. It is
no.
never.
Oh, the only reason is because Eric Holder and Barack Obama actually had the audacity to look into the camera and say to the American public that everything they did was legal. No, it wasn't. They presented it was we could have William K. Black is the greatest banking regulator in US history in terms he put thousands of bankers underneath the prison in the SNL crisis in the 80s. He's still alive. And he said, this is RICO, this is fraud. When you go to the rating agency, the reason why the credit system works is the rating agencies are independent from the banks, right? Okay, so when you go to the rating agency and you say this is AAA rated risk because we have insurance, we have a tranche that has no default history, AAA, and everything else, we have insurance to cover the defaults. So therefore, the whole bundle has no chance of insurance. And you intentionally do not capitalize the insurer that you actually wholly own. Yes, that's fraud, right? Oh, but did Eric? What did Eric Holder say? We got it as a matter of public record. What did Barack Obama say? So no one was held accountable.
Oh
I'm
no,
just saying.
no
I'm just
one.
saying. But
But
this is
people
what.
lost their
Yeah.
pensions. People
Yes, they
lost.
did.
Yeah,
And worse,
but keep
the
in mind
American.
too, when Bill Clinton left office, he left with the balls to say, "I'm leaving you with trillions of dollars in surpluses."
Yeah,
He
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and I said, if I could have said it to Bill, in order for these trillions of dollars to really come to fruition, the economy would have to stay this strong. The tax revenue would have to continue to come in at this rate. You're talking bullshit, but you're convincing a lot of people you accomplished this. And you
I, yeah, Bill Clinton, I talked for a half an hour in my episode 3 of how did we get here? How did we arrive to the current economy and the current situation? How did we arrive at a place where we reelected Donald Trump? And I told the story. It was a story of four establishment administrations: Bill Clinton, W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, right? And I talked about Trump one too. That was, but he's not an establishment type of politician.
He's really
Okay.
not, only because
And
he didn't know enough to how to be one. He
Oh
really
no,
did.
no, he well, how okay, you could say that it's because he doesn't know enough. So I cover Bill Clinton and I talk about Bill Clinton and I because I voted for Bill Clinton twice. I totally believed in Bill Clinton. I mean, I wrote him a 10-page letter when he got elected when I was in law school because I believed so much in him. And the magnitude of the betrayal of Bill Clinton, who presented himself to the American public as a member of the white working class. He was raised by a single mother. He was born and raised in rural Arkansas. He was the man from Hope, Arkansas, right? He had a incredibly close relationship with the black community because he grew up around them in poor rural Arkansas. This is the president of the United States who went on Arsenio Hall show. People need to go check it out. A black comedian having a show that was all about the people. Believe me when I say, the president of the United States went on the Arsenio Hall show with his shades on and played the saxophone like and blew the place out like he was at the Apollo, and he was fantastic. No, I Bill Clinton was you can't get smoother. Right. The running joke was he was the first black president, right? I mean, before Barack Obama, right? I mean, that's how close he was with the black community. And I show the magnitude of betrayal to both the black community and the white working class by Bill Clinton. I mean, the 94 crime bill that Joe Biden wrote and that he signed into law doubled the prison population in the United
Well, it
States.
was intended to do so. It was very
No,
much
well,
intended to.
it was
It was
intent.
very
Well,
much intended to do so. There is
the
no.
hook, the hook was the Violence Against Women's Act. There was an issue about prosecuting rape, right? Because it became a he said she said too much, and literally, and we had a series of, whether you talk about Chappaquiddick, with the Kennedys, and then Ted down the lady we had then Mike Tyson, right? We had a series of these famous rape cases where it became down to who you believed, right? And so there was a lot of pressure in the 94 crime bill to pass the Violence Against Women Act to lend clarity to how are we going to protect women in a context where through no fault of their own they find themselves in a he said she said, and then if the person happens to be prominent, if the person happens to be of the right to be candid color, right, we're more inclined to believe them. But no matter how prominent they are, if they happen to be the wrong color, i.e. Mike Tyson, oh no, we're not believing that. But that doesn't protect women. And so that was the hook to the 94 crime bill, right? But embedded in there was a broad range of mandatory sentencing guidelines that put non-violent criminals, people who are convicted
Three
of
strikes and you're
non
out. Three
three
strikes.
strikes and you're out, to life sentences or protracted sentences, right? And stuff like that. So you're talking about going from 1 million people in the US prisons to 2 million people by 20 by 2000, right? And stuff like that. Many of them, the majority is still white because the majority of the population is still white. But you're talking about a high percentage of people who were not convicted of violent crimes, right? Serving 20 years in prison, mandatory sentencing guys. It was
Barack
insane.
Obama actually commuted one sentence, and he was scheduled to speak at something that I didn't make it to, but I was really trying to get there, and I would have loved to hear from him. He spent about either 9 or 19 years in prison for a marijuana charge because it was his third strike.
It
And
was
Barack,
this is out. This is the cruelty of the of the
right,
of the
and then
1994
and this
crime bill.
The sad part about it is when you think Barack Obama commuted his sentence, how many did he not commute? Was the concern was.
People called Joe Biden during while he was president, to support the repeal of the mandatory sentencing guidelines. Much of it is highly discriminatory. So there are the mandatory sentencing for crack cocaine was like 3 times the mandatory sentencing for powdered cocaine.
Right, right. Yeah, it
I
was
mean, come on
insane.
now.
It was insane.
It's
No, I remember
insane.
that too. That specific actually.
Right. And
But
what was the famous quote from Hillary talking about the pack of wolves, or what did she call
I don't
it?
remember, but I do remember she had some doozies.
It was
That was for
back,
sure.
yeah, during the Clinton administration. So what I'm saying is Bill Clinton presented himself as one of us, of a man of the people, a
Well,
working class.
let me say this because
Totally
we
betrayed us.
yeah, absolutely. But he did. But I also have a when we think of lobbyists, and now it's probably changed a lot, but lobbyists got the name when standing in a lobby waiting on a Senate hearing. And then,
Yes.
of course, that's how they got their influence. And then ultimately, you got your line standers, which was essentially the beginnings of gig work, like Uber and picking up scooters and bringing them to your garage and charging them. Line standers were essentially standing in line for lobbyists while they were across the street and posh restaurants having drinks and eating. And then this basically potentially low income person would then call this lobbyist who was across the street at the restaurant and say, your time is coming up to head into the room. And then that lobbyist would come across from the restaurant, hand him a $50 or $100 bill, get in his spot in line. Now, the
Yes.
only thing I'm landing at is imagine again if we build this momentum of an educational renaissance where people understand and become their own lobbyists, where they don't let this type of legislation pass, where they don't let this kind of deception happen. The deception we're talking about, you just named off 4 different presidents on both sides of the aisle. There is no, as much as we want to consider the friction we consider every day, the fact of the matter is that the friction's not there behind the scenes. The
Behind the
friction
scenes. No.
the friction is there in public, and the Mike Johnson of the world is not at odds with a lot of Democrats like he likes to portray himself to be. And Chuck Schumer is not at all opposed to Mitch McConnell like they like to portray themselves to be. I am
Mhm.
sure they're having great funny conversations like me and you behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Look at these people we got going.
So my feeling is, and I'm kind of going to start wrapping up because that imagine if we me if imagine if people generally speaking, because me and your knowledge is extremely more technical than my knowledge is vague, but imagine if more people had my vague knowledge, not yours, not even the level of specific knowledge you have. Imagine how the world would change. Imagine how
Oh, it would be
America would
huge.
change. It would be
Yeah,
huge.
we
And I
need
can
to
only
empower us. Yes, with
and
information. Yes.
I try to do that through this podcast, and I continue to talk about how someday I'm going to create or be a part of, or somebody can do it just without me, a internet library of great information, and even make an incentive base to where kids watch it, do certain projects about it, and then achieve incentives, and then get some sort of gift card for
Well,
doing
can
that.
can we talk a few minutes? Because I know you typically like to keep it to 90 minutes. We're no longer, and so we still have, if that's your goal
Yeah,
tonight, to
absolutely,
keep it to
absolutely.
90.
No, no, I'm not
So we
rushing
still
us
have
out of here,
16.
but go
Yeah.
ahead. No,
So
no.
so okay, what that doesn't have to be a wish. Every Most of us have access to AI now, to chat GPT of some form, right? This is our superpower, right? The benefit, what makes chat GPT and the various GPTs so much better than purely the internet is that if you ask it the right questions, it will go out and get all available information on what you ask and provide you all the sources of your information. So this is a way to actually check the information that you're told to see if it's true. Okay. So what people can do right now, not having followed this stuff for the last 50 years, and so therefore you feel like, how can I ever catch up? You don't need to catch up. You got
No.
chatbot. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. If a politician tells you, um, whatever they're telling you that explains the policy that they're advocating for, and before you believe it because they happen to be your guy or your in your district or your party or whatever went to your school, go into your chatbot and verify the information that they're saying, right? And get it, that takes some practice of doing. But we have it in we could download the app on our phones, let alone if we have a laptop or a computer at home, right? It is easy to do in the same way that we all learned how to use the GPS so that no one is getting out the map anymore, right? Well, use your chatbot to empower you to make sure that the information that you're going to rely on, the information that you're going to tell your friend, no, man, this is the real story, is actually true. Because the reason why they keep us so confused and fighting against each other is because we have lost touch with what is actually true. But technology has given us the benefit. Technology has given us the benefit of being able to find out what the actual data is. So here's the trick in terms of how to use your chat GPT. It's very simple. You're not asking for editorial. You're not asking for chat what other people say about a particular subject, because all that's going to get you is the narrative you get when you turn on your TV. What you're asking chat is, give me the data that is related to this. I just want the data. If we're talking about whether climate change is real, what does the data say on on climate? In other words, have your inquiry first find out what actually happened. What is the recorded data of what actually happened related to whatever you're searching for? Once you have that information, right, now you could start making up your mind what that means, right? And but all the editorial stuff is where the spin comes from, is where it's all framed in ways that get us to fight against each other. No, find out the facts
For
and chat
yourself.
for
For
yourself,
yourself.
and chat can get you that if you ask it to give you data, not editorial, not someone's opinion about what happened, but what actually happened. Okay, that's the first thing. All right, so we can empower. Let's do that. Let's implement that. Then we are now empowered to hold our politicians. What you will find out is how badly they've been lying to you. You will find out just how I mean, just bold face. I mean, just the magnitude of the lies. And this is what I talk about on my podcast, Breadcrumbs.
Well,
I,
I'm
I
highly recommend breadcrumbs. Let me build on that a little bit because what you just said is
build on it,
incredible.
Coach.
I'm gonna tell you a childhood story that's actually just came to mind. So my
Tell it.
school was an older building. And I
All right.
remember it was an older building, and I it was that you felt like the halls hadn't been painted in years. Thinking back now, I remember one day they all said single file. We were young kids. And we all get together, about two classrooms at a time, and we all walk down the hall to this freshly painted room. And it had computers at every desk. And the teacher actually said to us, someday every home will have a personal computer. And we were like, wow. I think now my house has about 11 of them. But um,
Exactly.
I, and we were like, wow. And we
And
learned
tricorders.
and we learned a little bit about, yeah, that's these are fully operational computers. I use it all the time now doing stuff I emails, and but we
Yes. It,
learned
it can
the
scan your body. It scan your
yes.
body, get you.
But this in this particular day, in this particular class, it was the computer language was basic. That was the name of the computer
Yes.
language, was basic. And we
Yes.
learned how to use a computer. The first thing we would do is, like our friend, we would say, Jeff's an idiot. And then that would be line 10, Jeff's an idiot. And line 20 would be go to 10. And then scroll down the computer screen, Jeff's an idiot. And it would just keep scrolling down. And it was so much fun. And, and,
That was your first coding, huh, Coach? That's
yes,
right.
that was my
In
first
basic.
coding.
I
And I
did, yes, in
remember how
basic.
much fun it was, and I wanted to
Yeah.
learn more about it. Could you imagine now what you just said? If we did that with ChatGPT, somebody today said to me, ChatGPT isn't going to replace you. The person that knows how to use it's going to replace you. It's not an. It's a. If could one, it would, if we researched our politicians, the one thing that gets my goat worse than anything is the fact that two candidates in this last election, so I don't care who won, I don't care if you say one or the other stole the election, I'm not getting into that. The fact that they raised and spent over $3 billion on billboards that said no tax on tips for servers, or uh
Right.
I'm I want to pass gun control. uh, $3 billion that could have went to St. Jude's Children's Hospital to research, to
Right.
come to
Do
a
great
conclusion.
work. Yes.
Yes, yes, that's what I lost my. I mean, I would love to see that $3 billion go that way, because people are going, this is his career. Tell me about Hillary Clinton's career. Or however you would do it on ChatGPT, because even I'm a little aloof on ChatGPT. I would love our kids to become proficient on it and talk
Well,
about.
I will give you an example of how, okay. So let's say an issue, a live issue. Okay. If you want to know, is is Israel committing committing genocide in Gaza? What you want to get an answer to that. What we are told is that Israel can't be committing genocide in Gaza because they are responding to Hamas's terrorist attack on October 7th. So they have a right to self-defense. This is what and this is what's happening, right? So they can't be committing genocide. Okay. All right. So I asked Chat, is Israel committing genocide? What is the consensus view? And what Chat said back to me was the prevailing narrative, which is that according to most sources, and here are all the credible sources, right? New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all these sources, they can't be committing genocide because they're only responding to Hamas's terrorist attack. And I said, oh, okay. So then, see, this is where if you go for data, I happen to know the data. So I taught Chat. I said, okay, is the Genocide Convention the controlling legal document for determining if someone is committing genocide? Chat said yes. I said, okay, great. Okay, right. Under the Genocide Convention, right? Did Israel ratify the Genocide Convention? Are they subject to it? Chat said yes. I said, okay, great. According to the Genocide Convention, what court has the exclusive jurisdiction to decide whether someone is committing genocide? The chat said the International Court of Justice. Ah, yes. Okay. Has is Israel being charged with genocide in Gaza before the International Court of Justice? Chat said yes. Right. Okay. Is Israel defending itself? Chat said yes. Okay. Did Israel make the self-defense argument that they can't be guilty of genocide if if they are only defending themselves against Hamas's terrorist attack? Chat said yes. I said, okay, so then according to the decision that the International Court of Justice made on January 26, 2024, right? Did the court reject the self-defense argument? Chat said yes. I said, well, based on that information, how do you reconcile that between the consensus opinion? And Chat said the, the consensus opinion is not true. But that's how Chat found out. Why? Because the first question I asked Chat was what is the consensus on whether or not Israel's committing genocide? And they scanned all available data of sources who are answering that question, who are addressing that question, and got the consensus view, which was the prevailing narrative that we all get on our TV screens. Now, Coach, totally separate thing, but relating. Do you remember how Jon Stewart made all that money in the 2000s on Comedy Central, showing how the talking heads, the anchors from different television stations were saying the same thing, were reading from the same script? You remember how he would just show I mean just all down the chain from local to regional to national broadcasters saying the same language. Like okay, what's my point? Well, Bill Clinton did the 1996 Telecom Act, which allowed the consolidation of media. Wealth bought the media because Bill Clinton allowed them to own all of it. And so, guess what? This is why thousands of different newscasters tell the story and they're reading from the same damn script.
Absolutely. But then
That's what
now,
Comedy
but now
Central
we
do.
have an opportunity to change that. And
We
we've
do.
got to
We
bring
do.
that to people's attention. And
Well,
I'm going to bring
this,
this.
but that's how chat gets confused too. That's why you can't ask chat what is being said. How do people talk about it? What's the opinion? Because it's the same consensus prevailing narrative that is lying to us in the first place.
That's
You
an
got to
important
ask for the data.
feature of how do you ask the correct questions. Whether
Yes.
I don't know that any elementary school is going to use Israel as the operative example.
Well, I
That's
just wanted to use
okay.
it because it's a
No,
very
no,
vivid
it's
example.
it is, and I don't, and I liked it. But however you create the understanding of how to ask the question, it doesn't matter how. It's how you ask the question, not the question. When you have when the child, when the voter, when the small investor, when the small businessman has the question, how do you ask the question? Who is the politician that's going to work most in my favor? What is his average of keeping his promises? Because that information may be out there. Because there's
Yes.
literally
Now that
a
information. See,
spoken
you can ask
average.
chat that. You
The
can ask
spoken
chat that.
average, the overall average I've heard is politicians keep about 5 to 7% of their promises. So if you're believing in this guy 100%, now I would honestly say, with again, I think Donald Trump has a higher average than that. And that may be a point of contention people have with him because
He does have a higher average than that. I
some of the
mean, it's just
promises he kept, people would have never thought he would keep. Like Barack Obama said, I'm closing Guantanamo Bay. He got to be president. And they're like, you can't close Guantanamo. Okay, I'm the president. I can't do something so irresponsible. You promised it 50 times during the campaign. I'm glad you got specific, actionable intelligence that told you not to do it. But the fact of the matter is, you shouldn't have promised it. Did you get anything on that before you promised it? Did you look into it, how it would work? Because what you've done is you've taken the issue of Guantanamo Bay is not the real estate. The issue of Guantanamo Bay is we're holding prisoners we can never try because we're going to release national secrets in order to incriminate them. So we can't do that. So we just can't try them. So what you've done is you've moved this prisoner from Guantanamo Bay to the Bali Islands, but he'll still never be tried. He'll still never be released. So the notion of closing Guantanamo Bay is still in existence, that it's not closed, and the policies and the processes are still in effect. That's and that's an issue.
no, and it is, but by using chat. So, for example, take it. If we've had a lot of controversy surrounding RFK and relating to vaccines, and so it literally you could go to chat and ask chat, give me the data on the side effects of the COVID-19 vaccines. What vaccine harm? What evidence of vaccine harm is reported? Right. And you will find a lot of evidence of it.
And
You
you know
could,
where
you
they
could,
get their information from? A lot of times they get their Chat GPT gets its information from PubMed, which a lot of people don't know about.
it is, that is one source. There's no doubt about it. But see, what I'm saying is chat is not a black box in that. Well, it is to a certain extent, but any output, it does provide the range of sources. And what I'm saying to you here is if you can see the range of sources, and you ask the right question, you can have confidence that you're getting the right information, right? So if you want to know what is the truth behind, vaccine injuries and the incidence of vaccine injuries, there's lots of data out there, right? Are there any peer-reviewed scientific studies that show um, that support what RFK claims in his book, The Real Anthony Fauci? You could ask chat that and it will go out there and get the information and come back and summarize it for you, give you the itemized list, give you all the sources. That's how you address these things. And so if your politician in your local election is running on a platform, you could put that platform into Chat GPT and ask, if you can tell me all available information on the background of this politician and does that align with this platform that he's saying? What is his historical record? I mean, you could,
Would that eliminate the $3 billion that was raised for this one president for two people? Forget
oh, they're
about
still
across the
raising it.
nation.
They're still
They're
raising it.
still
But
cannibalizing every bit of funds that
yes,
can go to bad things. And would it put there's this whole Citizens United legislation where corporations can spend billions of dollars on a candidate as long as the candidate doesn't say at the end of the commercial, I'm Bill Clinton, I approve this message. As long as you leave that part out, as the corporation could create any advertisement they want. Imagine if that advertisement didn't work and they stopped spending the money on that. Maybe they could use that money to pay their employees a little better. I mean,
right? Oh,
I
well,
mean,
they
just
could.
I
I
mean, it
mean,
could happen that way. So my
I mean,
feeling
what is
is,
stopping Amazon right now? Seriously, what is stopping Amazon right now from paying all their employees a minimum salary of $100,000 a year?
I mean, what? Nothing. But they're not.
I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, what if they did that? What would that do to? I mean, given the wealth of that company. I mean, this is
Well,
what
it would probably,
they're
like we said,
creating.
well, when
Yeah.
you think about it, where we started with, it would cannibalize the investors portion of the take, but
No, no, the company, look at the worth of the company. No, this is, in fact, it could be done not, not by taking it out of the profits of the company. Bezos himself could do it,
from his
could
net
fund
worth,
it.
yeah, he could do it from his net worth.
He could create from his network, he could create a separate fund that would provide the gap to Amazon, the company, to pay them $100,000 a year at least, and a sliding scale up, depending on what they do for the company, right? That he would bridge the gap on a fund that would be invested prudently, that just in the same way that we capitalize a long-term pensions, right? He could do that, and it would barely affect his net worth. I mean, $140 billion. I mean, he
And it
could,
keeps
I'm just
growing.
saying,
It keeps growing.
he could, that would, I mean, that's like 400,000 employees. He is that fat. And instead he will spend that money and more to do what? Replicate a space trip that we did in 1962? I mean, where he barely went into the atmosphere. I mean, come
And
on,
his space company doesn't do anything other than that, but
no,
transcends.
it's ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. It's okay. It's sort of like what's the Wall Street movie, the something of Wall Street, the
Wolf of
Ace
Wall
of
Street.
Wolf of Wall Street. Okay, the problem with human beings, particularly dudes who got too much money and not enough sense, is they start playing midget bowling. I mean, they hire midgets to slide them down the down the lane. Okay, but because they got that much money, that's Wolf of okay. This is Bezos spending how many billions to 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 bring William Shatner up
Well,
up into what?
he bring an old lady up there too. That her trip was
Yes, and
canceled.
just
Yeah.
to do some ridiculous trip in the upper atmosphere. He didn't go to the moon. I mean, just in the upper atmosphere and to come back and stuff like that, and have
Right.
the audacity to look in the camera and say thank you to the Amazon employees who he's paying $15 an hour that you helped make this possible. When when if he had just skipped the trip, that he would have made them all upper middle class.
He would
Kind
have.
of,
It's funny because it's
yeah,
true. It's true because that was just his little that was
yeah.
his like you said, like just an outing. That was just his
That's just
outing.
thing. Or how about this ridiculous yacht that's so big that
They
some
had to take a bridge
bridge
down. Yeah, they
they
had to take a
had to
bridge down.
take the bridge down in Europe, some European city,
And they
some
promised they
bridge
would
that's
never take
300
it.
years old. Right. I mean, just to let his stupid, ridiculous citywide yacht come to the
But
I mean,
I thought in the end they rerouted the voyage out to
oh,
not
we
take the
did, but
bridge down. Yeah, I
my
thought
point is that this is the level of ridiculousness that when you let the accumulation of wealth get that excessive, that they don't know what to do with this money.
no,
It is,
no.
and yet there's so many people who, if they just had a sliver, small numbers, there are so many people who would do well on $50,000 a year. Just give them $50,000 a year and they will show you what good living is, right? No, there's so many people. And this guy, I mean, he's got stacks that he ain't going to see anytime soon. His children are not going to see it. The grandchildren are not going to see it. It's just way out there. This is that. How do we get to an
I,
ethics
I don't. It's
where
incredible when you.
that is a virtue, where that is honored, that you could take so much that you will never use what you're taking, right? At a time where so many people don't have enough to just get by. And then you're going to roll over and go to sleep. If that's not the definition of pathology, of a sociopath, right? I mean, my God, I don't get where we are, But we're about to take this thing back. That's the bottom line, Coach Drippy, is that, and that's why I'm calling you to stand with the disenfranchised American middle class and American working class. They happen to be anti-establishment. That's
Well,
and
there's
the
more to it than
only
just anti-establishment,
no,
right?
no, no, it's not. No, it's not. There is nothing more to it. The establishment is the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats, is the neocons and the neoliberals, is George W. Bush
No,
getting
well,
honored by Joe Biden, right? Is Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi joining hands with with Senator McCain, right, to pass TARP, $700 billion to bail out the bankers, right, and then let the pension funds go bankrupt. That is the
I
establishment.
100% would
The,
agree with
the, the
that.
middle
Yeah,
class
yeah,
is the middle
I
class, and
100%
the
agree with
working
that.
class is it needs to stand together. Right now, the only option we've given them is Donald J. Trump.
Oh my God,
It's
let's
I know,
wrap it
no,
up with it.
seriously. No, that's okay.
There's
We
a
could
lot to
have
be
given
said
him
on that.
Bernie. We could have given him Bernie.
No, no, I'm not a fan of Bernie either. I've
No,
said that enough
all
times.
I'm saying to you is they are the only anti-establishment voices. I
Well,
mean,
that's my
you
point.
want
Is we
to
need more anti-establishment
we need
voices.
more anti-establishment
Yeah,
voices. Well, if you only give them
it's
Hillary
not about.
Clinton, Joe Biden, you can't get more establishment than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. That's two elections in a row. And then you add Kamala Harris. And if she only tried to run against Joe Biden, but she completely wrapped Joe Biden around herself by saying there is nothing she could think of.
She
There's
said
nothing
it
she
on the
could think
View.
of that
No,
she
I
would do
remember that.
that she would
Yeah,
do
she said it
differently.
on the
So,
View.
okay, if that's the only choice you give the American public, more of the same that betrayed us for the last 30 years, yes, Trump is the lesser of two evils. He is a carnival barker. He is, I mean, mail order wife. He is, he
Well,
is ridiculous. But
there's
he
no
is the
evidence that
only,
she was a mail order wife. Let's just be
well,
clear.
come on. No, all I got to say is, come on, go all the way back into history, include Marla Maples, right, and tell me that Mister Slick Smooth Toupee and stuff like that is not who had more money than talent. Didn't go to some. I'm not even saying. Look at his first wife. All these Eastern Europeans, really, where Trump is hanging out in Romania and all that. Come on, no, this we can put two and two together. Right? That
Well,
and the thing is, he is that kind of carnival barker. Isn't that I mean, look at him. The only thing he doesn't have is a plaid suit, right? Right. But I criticize him. But the fact is, he has wrapped himself in the anti-establishment. He has promised to dismantle this government that
and
has
he's doing it. He
disserved,
promised
and he's
it.
doing
Promise,
it. That's
promise
what I'm
made.
saying.
Promise kept.
So that's the
For
only
certain.
choice
I'm
we've
not
given the American
necessarily.
people.
I'm not a fan of the dismantling. I think it should be done more orderly. I think it should have been done a lot slower, but he is doing what he said he's going to do. I've always given him that credit. I've always given him that leeway. I've always said when you think about what politicians have said and then it comes to the realization they just can't deliver on, he's never come to that realization I can't deliver on that. He says it, he does it. As much as it's I think it's
That's right.
destructive. I think it's destructive. I've said it's
And
destructive.
and
I
the
pointed out
government
this, but I've
shutdown is
also
only working for Trump.
and
Just
everybody knows that. Everybody
it's
knows
because
that.
the government is collapsing. This is
It's
the
what he
longer we
wants,
go,
and it's what initially Chuck Schumer said. I don't want to allow the government shutdown, and they all lambasted him for not allowing it to shut down. And Chuck Schumer said it's going to give him too much control, and they insisted he allow it, and he allowed it. And you have what Chuck Schumer. This is nothing new. We all knew that he is going to make a lot of these layoffs permanent. So, and he's the only guy that would do it. If I were the president, I wouldn't have the heart to do it. I'd say, let's come to sort of a, give us the
You don't
CR.
care. Get
No,
fired. Yeah.
I mean, he's got nothing to lose. It's his last term. I mean, you could say all day he's not going to allow the midterms. He's not going to allow the actual. I don't know what's going to
He
happen next.
will.
All
He
I know is,
will.
right. All I know is that as far as I'm concerned, this is his last rendezvous. This is how it works in America. This is something he can't change. And if he finds a way to change it, I'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For
No,
now,
well, I agree with you. I don't, I just don't see that happening. But all
I
I could
don't see
say
it
is
happening. It's all cross that. If we talk about it, all we're doing is building him up more. Like he's going to do something even bigger than anyone else did. We're just saying he's going to do the impossible again, and some people like that. So I'm not talking about it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I have absolutely loved this chat. We do have to wrap it up
has
because
been
I got.
great, Coach.
It's been awesome, awesome, and we're going to do it again. Let me say this off. Let's just go ahead and tell us about the book. I'll tell us off the recording.
Okay, yes. Okay, so the book is Onward at Last, the 2024 Presidential Election Edition. It was published by Atmosphere Press. It's available on, yes, Amazon, on Barnes and Nobles. It's available wherever you buy books and stuff like that. Please check it out. The podcast is Breadcrumbs, a podcast for people who know it's not working. And after this conversation, you got to be kind of
Pretty
thinking
clear
it's
on
not working.
that. Let me
Check it
say this
out
is
on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and on Patreon. Thanks so much, Coach.
and this is political no brainer. You know the drill. Check it out on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast. Kevin, this has been wonderful. Let me tell you something off camera. Let me go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you. Like, share, subscribe, comment, both breadcrumbs and political no brainer.